is true.
Crazy virus stuff. Yeah, hi, everyone coming in. Let us know where you're coming from today. And just repeating, if you get disconnected, we are live on YouTube. So you can always hop on our YouTube channel, which is just YouTube/Coach Aria. And you will see this there too. But we are at the time that we're supposed to be. So let's maybe get started. Hi, everyone. Oh, Trinidad. Woohoo. Is that a new one? I feel like you've been here before. Anyway, today's webinar is on self-coaching, and Ram is going to be leading it. I'm just saying hello, and I will be here maybe, possibly, but I'll be on the chat. So if you need something, ping me. I will put the password in at the end of the session because I remembered this week. And yes, I have pink hair. So anyone who's like, oh my God, what happened? This happened. It was supposed to be light pink, but it didn't turn out light pink. So that's what I look like now. So I'm going to go off screen, possibly the background. Ram, tell us about self-coaching.
Yeah, people might like to see your pink on the screen. So stay on the screen, mute yourself.
I'll stay on the screen. I'll just mute myself.
Hey, okay, adds color. Okay, guys. Yeah, for two reasons, I thought we would do this this month. I'm not quite sure whether this was a subject that we had originally planned. One is it's opportune because of some of the changes that ICF made in its competencies, and also a direction that we are taking in Coach Aria for a while now, which we wanted to sort of standardize. And also the fact that something which is following from here in a slightly different way, which is about going deeper into neurosciences and so on, is the series that I would like to begin from April onwards, maybe for the next 3 months, 4 months. I don't know for how long, as long as it takes. So to set the kind of background, many of you know that ICF in November 2019 introduced a new set of competencies. And believe you me, people like Cindy and I, and many of those who work with us as trainers, we felt that it was a really very, very good initiative. It was something that needed to have been done, and certainly, even if it was probably later than what we would have liked it to be, it was excellent. It was done primarily with two changes. They compress what earlier used to be listening, questioning, and communication into just one aspect of communication, that was listening. And then they added something called coaching mindset. And they also made changes to many of the competencies to avoid duplication. The PCC markers are yet to be in place, but the sub-competencies that have been outlined are good enough in most cases to be construed as PCC markers and for trainers to do their job. Though in effect, it's in 2021 that the new competencies will come into effect as far as assessment and markers are concerned. But all of us are expected to start teaching those new markers now, which is what we are doing, our new competencies. So just briefly, what used to be CC2, which was about agreement, is called coaching mindset, and agreement has become CC3. And the significant difference in both of these is that the coaching mindset brings in a number of parameters for the coach in terms of internal awareness. It talks about reflective practice. It talks about learning and development. It talks about intuition. Many of those things which were totally absent before. Earlier in the ICF competencies, those of you probably who remember it by rote, what was awareness was primarily about the client awareness. It said nothing about the coach's awareness. There was nothing in the ICF competencies which talked about coaching awareness. Now we have something very, very solid, which talks about the awareness of the coach, the mindset of the coach, how the coach should be. Whether it's going to be easy to measure in a conversation or one session or not, that's a different matter. But I think it was long overdue and which was already in place for several years with EMCC as its first competency of understanding self. It was a cornerstone of all organizational development practices as the concept of use of self, without which the whole OD structure would not quite exist. And so it's something which really resonates for us. And what we're going to talk about today is as to how that can be enhanced. The coach's mindset towards what Carl Rogers describes as unconditional positive regard, congruence, and empathy, creating internal awareness of the coach and with which the coach addresses a client. The second change that ICF made, major change, there are others minor in terms of the way that competencies have been described, is about bringing in the larger journey of coaching into the agreement stage, not merely what happens in the session. Earlier, the 5 competencies that were there, markers that were there as part of CC2, were about what happens in the session, what is the outcome of the session, what is the importance of the session, what is the evidencing of the session outcome, what is it that needs to be addressed, etc., etc. But now, the first 4 sub-competencies which are described in coaching agreement are about the larger journey, because coaching is not about just one session. It doesn't work that way. Those of you who are familiar with the Kocharya 3A model of awareness, action, and anchoring, it's not enough if you create awareness and lead to action in that one session, but that needs to be followed up. There needs to be action learning. There needs to be anchoring. There needs to be feedback. And that involves not only just the coach and the client, very often it involves a larger system. So ICF now talks about stakeholders for the first time and the larger journey for the first time. It's fantastic. It's really good. So in a sense, things that we have been working on, irrespective of the ICF competency, that we have been working with people for the last several years now, 3-4 years, which is both understanding self, which is now the coaching mindset, and the systemic part of coaching, which is now part of the coaching agreement, have been formally introduced into ICF. And many of our learners would be familiar with that, but we would necessarily be focusing more and more on these now that they are really part of the ICF competencies. They were already part of the EMCC competencies, which I mentioned before. So anyway, today's session is not about the ICF competencies, but more about a specific aspect of what we have introduced in the last couple of years as part of our coaching, which we believe has made a huge difference. A bit of a background is some of you who have been familiar with some of the stuff that I've been writing, even on Kocharya blogs and outside, has been about what I call as a barefoot leadership. For many, it doesn't even make sense. The barefoot leadership, at least in my mind, is about the fact that every one of us is a leader within, but we may not fully be aware of it. And once awareness is created, how each one of us can influence, inspire, and lead other people. This was a concept that I learned and I worked with during a period of time when I was actively engaged in village level development in India, one of the probably the poorest and the most criminal parts of India, in the northern part of India, where we were working with farmers at the village level. And one of the things that I learned was, despite all the adversities that they faced, they had such an amount of wisdom. If only somebody listened to them and tapped into that wisdom and enabled them to move forward. What the system was doing to them, especially the governmental system, which was based on providing subsidies and so on, was actually reduce their own leadership potential, giving them packages and making them subservient to what others were providing rather than helping them move out of what they were in into a leadership position, which is what we tried to do. And this happened when I read a book called Small is Beautiful. I'm not quite sure who's author. Some of you might probably remember. It's a long, long time ago, which was surprisingly a European who wrote that book. And it was about the Gandhian model of village development. The reason why I'm talking about it is from in that experience, a friend of mine reminded me a few days ago, with whom I'm friends for a long, long time. He mentioned, Ram, you used to distribute this book about barefoot doctors. Do you still have it? Yeah, Schumacher, Small is Beautiful. Thank you very much. It's a small book. I would really recommend all of you to read this book. It's fantastic. It's really fantastic. This book about barefoot doctors was published by an NGO in India, which gave tips on how you can treat people, including much of it will be valid today with the coronavirus pandemic. Simple things like, if you're dehydrated, all that you needed to do was to, in boiled water, put a spoonful of sugar and a pinch of salt. And that's as good as any electrolyte, probably far better. That's all it takes. It's free. You don't have to waste plastic. You don't have to do all kinds of nonsense and pollute the atmosphere. And there were many such things which were there, which could deal with pretty much most, let's say, what would be average disease, 80% of illnesses and accidents that one has. And that concept later I was able to use with healing, which was essentially use the intelligence of the person to develop the awareness within that person, which is really the job of a coach, which is what we are supposed to do. We are not supposed to provide solutions to people. We are supposed to help them develop solutions. The question that came up for me over the last 3 or 4 years was, are we really doing it ourselves? Fortunately for me, I had been exposed to meditation. I had been doing it for a long time, reflection and so on and so forth. But even I was not in the active habit of putting it down as a reflective practice, a journaling practice. And when I started doing it, applying that reflection in a coaching format to myself, and as required, I would work on it as a blog. Very often, I mean, Magda gets overwhelmed with the kind of blogs suddenly I start writing because ideas come up as I'm reflecting on them. And usually I have them when I'm having my morning walk. Yes, I could probably record it, but I have a reasonably good memory even at my age, so I can hold it and then write it down. At one level, of course, it provides a tremendous amount of self-discovery and the growth for anyone who does that. And it also enhances our ability to coach because of the self-reflective habits. And it also provides benefit to everybody else based on the enhancement of one's own awareness and how we do that. So what I would do is at this point in time, stop and introduce 2 people, or including Magda, because she was also part of the cohort that I worked with last year, pretty much the whole of last year. And Raven and Tracy, in fact, they have both cleared their ACTP certification. Raven has already applied for his senior practitioner with EMCC, should be getting it quite soon. He's appearing for his PCC soon, which pretty automatic, he would get that. Tracy is applied for EMCC. She's in the process of applying for PCC. Magda would be somewhat shortly. Now, we started this practice with this cohort, with every one of them, reflecting, using the coaching format for themselves, and journaling on that. It's not a sales pitch. I haven't really talked to them. I haven't prepped them, except at least Tracy, when she came in, I asked Tracy, would it be okay if you were to share your experiences? So I would like them to share briefly with you and authentically in terms of how that process influenced them and perhaps was of some benefit to them. So whoever wants to go first, Tracy, Revan, Magda, please take about 5 minutes each, and then we'll get back to synthesizing it and maybe answering any questions that come up on the board, and then go into a brief description of what process people can adopt. Thank you. Tracy, would you like to go first?
Sure. My internet's a little spotty, so I just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yeah, but not so loud, but if you can be a little bit louder, I know it may be difficult, but yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, is this a bit better?
Much better.
Okay, wonderful. Well, as you already mentioned, I started with this program, I think it was about a year ago now, and the process self-coach really well to get me through several different types of situations, including a very stressful summer project that I had that was and how it first, started working for me is using the those same, like the original CC2 questions that we use. So I use those same questions that we would ask a client with myself. So I would, and journal, reflect, and ask myself, is this important? What can maybe or can contribute, what am I for? And that was really helpful in through some things, not even just within coaching, but just as I said, within my work role as well. I came up with a really good strategy for myself to deal with stress moments. Was with it and not able to sort of walk away and process. So I came up with like a little acronym that worked at that time that sort of brought me back to the major shifts that I made in my coaching session. And the other thing that was really wonderful, Ram, is that you taught us SCT, so the sensations, emotions, and thoughts. And that's something that I've used quite a bit as well in self-coaching, kind of reflecting on what are the sensations that are coming up for me right now, what's happening in my body. Sometimes I would realize I was very tired, or I would, recognize that I had a lot of distress in my stomach, and sort of like digging into that a little bit deeper and thinking about what emotions were present for me, what thoughts were coming up for me. And that really helped me sort of figure out what was happening for me right at that moment. And then that gave me a point to sort of assess and move forward on when I was self-coaching.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tracy. I think, unfortunately, I just want to mention to all the audience out there that Tracy is, at the moment, she's in Nicaragua, and she has a power outage. So it's a bit unfortunate, but we will try and get her back for any other comments as we go along. Revan, would you like to go next, and then Magda, and then I can go into a long explanation of what the process is about. Thanks, Tracy.
Yes, thanks, Ram. Hi, everyone. This is Revan from Bangalore. And just like Tracy and Magda, we part of the cohort for the last 1 year. We finished in end of Jan. I think when we initially started the course, most of us were aware of what is goal setting and how to kind of plan towards a goal and, jot down a plan and then try to work towards achieving that goal. But what happened during this course, going through the entire framework of ICF and coming to know the various competencies and the additional competencies which really started helping us out was presence and active listening and powerful questioning and all these kind of competencies which I was not aware of personally, in the sense which could be applied as a self-coaching process. So initially when we started the course, Ram introduced us to the John Whitmore, Sir John Whitmore's model of GROW, and where it was a simple structure of identifying your goal, where are you, what's the reality, what is coming in the way, that's the obstacle, and then finally figuring out the way forward about how to overcome those obstacles and reach your goal. And that was as simple as that. But initially applying this, getting the results was not always happening for me. And then it took me some time that when I started digging into the competencies and started digging into the markers, I realized that it's much more than just why am I getting stuck and really trying to understand that aspect of it. And that aspect became possible when I started understanding the competencies of presence and active listening. I mean, it was difficult for me to perceive before that I could actively listen to myself. It was difficult for me to perceive before that I could become present to what's happening to me inside, getting present to my own belief systems, my values, the biases, the prejudices, the kind of subtle, unconscious little thought processes that were coming in the way, and I couldn't really spot them. But this entire process of learning how to coach others helped me understand that I could actually spot these things in myself and then work on them and then find a way to understand how to really deal with this entire realm. And that is what was really a huge empowering process in this last 1 year. And it's really empowering. On top of that, when you really apply things like the SMART goals and etc., once you understand that you're working out of a belief system and the limitations in the belief system, then it starts becoming easier to really self-coach yourself. This is what I would say was a huge takeaway from going through this last 1 year of learning the coaching process.
Yeah, it's amazing that you mentioned about those factors of trust, absence, trust, presence, and listening, etc. As far as self-coaching is concerned, I'll expand on it on how that happens because that's extremely important. Because it's far easier to focus just on the CC2 agreement part of it and continue, but to be able to develop the awareness of how these other qualities of a coaching process are being developed within you as you go through a self-coaching process is tremendously valuable. So Magda has been self-coaching herself primarily to sort of enable her maintain equanimity with me. So,
No.
so let me ask her to share her viewpoint.
It just so happened that this morning that was the reason, but that's not usually what happens. But no, self-coaching for me personally has been life-changing, frankly. For me, learning about coaching, the biggest impact has been on my personal life and just how I deal with stuff. So there's a couple things that I now do. So I have a doggy, which everyone here knows because he's always on the calls and he's next to me right now. Hi, Sailor. I usually take Sailor for, a couple of walks during the day, but especially the morning walk, just like Ram was talking about, that he gets ideas for blog posts and then he just goes home and writes them. For me, that's when my little self-coaching kicks in. So just like, when you're coaching a client, you're supposed to be focused on the client, right? Like you're not supposed to be thinking of what am I having for dinner. For me, that's what happens when I'm walking with Sailor is just my mind clears and something pops into my head and I literally kind of have this, I go through talking to myself, sometimes out loud, usually not, usually in my head, as if I was talking to a coach. So sometimes I actually, when I say self-coaching, I do it literally to myself. Usually when I'm thinking about something bigger or when I like especially a goal, something I want to do with Coacharia, and I need to kind of process, okay, so why hasn't this happened? What do I need to do, etc. That's on the long walks. But on a regular basis, like Tracy, I found SET, the sensations, emotions, and thoughts check-in process. I found that so surprisingly helpful. It's like, it's one of those things that just puts a framework onto something that I feel like a lot of us do consciously or unconsciously. But it's a great way to kind of figure out, okay, this is where I'm at right now. And it helps you get to figure out what's next and what is the appropriate way to deal with where I'm at right now. And it's also a great way to kind of check in with yourself at the end of whatever you're going through to see, well, how are my sensations, emotions, and thoughts different now than they were, an hour ago or a week ago, whenever I was thinking about this thing. So like this morning, to give a specific example, I got an email from Ram, and as those of you who attended our email webinar last week know, stuff gets lost in emails, and we interpret things based on how we interpret things. Words on paper are hard. So Ram sent me an email and it got me a little frustrated. And I did reply to it. It wasn't rude, I hope not, at least. But it irked me momentarily. And, instead of kind of getting riled up, which I would have maybe 2 years ago, and maybe letting it fester, I took a deep breath. And I'm like, okay, what's this doing to my body? What am I thinking about? How is it making me feel? And just kind of going through the check-in process kind of grounded me a little bit. And then I started thinking, okay, well, why am I feeling this way? And I started thinking about, okay, well, this is a person that I used to work with a couple of years ago, before Coach Arya, and there's things that he used to say to me that kind of triggered me. And I kind of went through this process for about 15 minutes, maybe, as I was making coffee, it just so happened. And I feel much better. I was able to get on the call, an hour later here. And Ram, I still love you. And we're going to talk after this, and it's fine. But 2 years ago, before I had this framework of set, I think I would have just let things fester. And yes, we would have talked about it, but eventually, and I would have probably had some frustration building up before you and I connected. So anyway, set has been a lifesaver, as has self-coaching while I'm walking Sailor Dog.
Thanks, Magda. And I wish Nessa was here today, and she had some amazingly powerful transformation in her. I think all of them know how it worked for her. You've talked about, Revan mentioned about the absence. Sorry, I keep saying absence because for me, presence is absence. And I always keep saying that the absence of the coach's ego is what is really the presence. And my interpretation of presence is absence. So that, trust and listening and all that stuff. And two of them, both Tracy and Magda, referred to this set process or ACT process. So let me start with that. Amongst the benefits that I mentioned, what I perhaps forgot to add is the simple benefit of you're becoming emotionally more intelligent. That means becoming aware of what your emotions are, and rather than those emotions controlling you, you being able to control those emotions, as a result of which you would be able to be aware of what other people's emotions are and how do you interact socially. So both the intrapersonal and interpersonal, as Daniel Goleman would say, the emotional intelligence is almost like a built-in kind of benefit of any self-coaching. And I think that is really where, like when Revan mentioned about developing greater presence within yourself, and that presence is then somehow it is transmitted to others who are in dialogue with you, as in the case of a client. That starts happening because in many ways you are partnering yourself. You are partnering yourself and you are allowing your emotions to come up. And the ACT process, which is it's nothing original that we discovered. It's a process that has existed in the OD terminology, the organizational development terminologies, for as long as anybody can remember, from the days of Kurt Lewin. Sensations, emotions, and thought. As you experience something, what is it that you feel in your body as your sensations? And what would you like to label them as emotions? And then what are your thoughts concerning it? And what is it that you would like to happen at the end of it? It's as simple as that. So in any kind of an exercise, if many of you may have been, at least some of you may have been through OD labs, whether it's with ISABs or Sumidars or NTL or whoever. And all these labs would start with basically saying, okay, as you're listening to somebody and someone is speaking, would you like to explore your own sensations, emotions, and thoughts and be able to appreciatively express them to the person who is speaking and vice versa? And that's really what creates an amazing discovery of oneself, discovery of other people within yourself, and also a powerful partnership. And in the process, something very intangible, something very ineffable happens. You start believing in yourself. And I can go into, when we talk about neurosciences, remind me, I'll go into the details of that. There's a very good reason for it. There's a very good quantum science theory behind it. So as a result of your ability to open up with your emotions within yourself and be able to analyze them and maybe able to come to terms with yourself, this is the reason why I'm feeling this way or likely to behave this way because of those feelings if I do not overcome them and be able to come to terms with them. In many ways, you are validating yourself. You are, in a sense, expressing an acceptance of yourself. Your self-love, your self-esteem goes up. You don't require other people to validate you. In the process, you start listening to yourself. You may end up by shutting off an inner voice, which is always critical. The more validation that you develop of yourself, the less of that negative inner voice starts happening. And more of something really very positive starts happening. So in some ways, this whole process of reflection not only works towards a tangible outcome, which we will talk about in a minute, but intangibly, it builds up something extremely powerful within you. You just have to experience it yourself to be able to see that happen. But what it does require is that you do it authentically. You do it in a state of what I might like to call it as the being state. It is not that you're looking for a solution. It's not that you want something out of it. If you are familiar with meditation or even some form of relaxation, if you go into that state and allow yourself to open up to yourself as you would possibly to a coach, then you will find automatically these things starts happening. So these are basic changes in our inner self, as it were, of developing the ability to listen to ourselves, to be able to accept ourselves, to be able to love ourselves, and in many ways, establish peace with ourselves. It could be compassion. Somebody asked, is it similar to compassion? Yeah, compassion could be one of the outcomes. But I would say that the starting point, to my mind, would really be a self-acceptance. I'm okay as I am. And that gives me a self-validation. It gives me a self-acceptance. And when I have those with me, it's very possible that that would reflect on other people. Because it's what we actually see in other people is very often something that we mirror from ourselves. Our negativities are being transferred to the other person, and we start looking at them in a way that our conditioned self tells us to do. So if we are able to disengage ourselves from that and learn to accept ourselves, we would be able to do that much better with other people as well. I learned a lot. Meenakshi says, ISABS, human process, happy and say why I behave, etc. Yeah. And yeah, if you, well, you are doing it with a group of people, strangers. It's much better that you do it with strangers. With people whom you know, it's much more difficult. But you can do it if you really try. you can do it but yourself. There's nothing that sort of more difficult. It is much easier if you start doing it yourself. But you have to be really at peace with yourself. I find the best times for me would be when I walk, like Magda says, she walks a dog, or anything else of that state where you are completely by yourself, alone, not lonely, and you are in a state that you are able to get into that being state of yourself. So now, simply put, when you are doing a self-coaching exercise, try to center yourself. If you are a meditator, meditate. All that you have to really do is go into a few deep breathing cycles, breathe deeply from below your navel, below your gut, hold it for a short period. As long as you're comfortable, exhale slowly, hold, keep repeating it a few times. And again, we will talk about it another time, but I was really elated when I read this book about HeartMath, which people had recommended me a long time ago. I hadn't really read through it. And I found it's all just about that. They talk about something called cardio breathing. All it's about is really focusing on your heart and deep breathing. And what it does is to enhance, excite your parasympathetic autonomous nervous system, which allows you to calm down, which allows you to relax, and so on and so forth. So this is a starting point. Tracy was saying, Draven also said this, we suggest that you start with, there's a CC2 kind of an exercise, which is like an agreement. So in a typical CC2, what you're really going to ask yourself is, or now it's going to be CC3, what is it that I want to achieve at this point in time? The session can be as long as you want it, as long as you can afford it. So it's basically about the intent. Where do I wish to go with where I am? Like Magda was saying, there was something that she read that upset her. It could be something else. It could be something that happened the day before that I'm still getting over. It could be just a problem that I'm trying to solve. It could be something that I'm trying to convey to somebody which I'm unable to convey. It could be multiple other things. I want to go from a point A to point B. Whatever that point B is my intent. And once I decide on it, and I'm in the being state, and I'm looking at this movement from where I am to where I wish to go. So understand for myself what that is. That's a 2.1. The 2.2 would be, yeah, what would it look like when I achieve that? Where would I be? If my objective is to climb the Mount Everest, when I'm top of the Mount Everest, then I should be seeing nothing above me because I'm on the highest point in the world, as it were. So for each one of us, depending upon where we wish to go, there is something that is going to tell us that we have reached there. And also, how would we feel when we reach there? That's far more important. Again, bringing that ACT back into picture. Once I reach there, what would be my sensation in my body? What is it that my emotions would tell me? What are my thoughts, and so on and so forth? It makes it much easier for us to be able to realize the point that we have reached when we have some idea about where we are going. It doesn't have to be something absolutely cast in stone. It may change, but at least we have some idea the direction where we are going. Then what I very often do, and this is not always possible in a coaching conversation, but it's certainly possible in a personal conversation with yourself. We always do, even in a real life conversation, what is called the 2.3 or the importance. What are you going to benefit if you get what you want? That's a very, very simple question. And occasionally we might ask another what if question. What if you don't? Because that will also underpin in a way the importance of, if you don't get it, is there going to be any kind of a great liability? Is there going to be any great kind of great disadvantage. But there are two other questions. These are the what if questions. There are two other questions, what I would call as so what questions. So what if I get what I want? What difference does it make? What doesn't change? Let's say if I start with an objective for whatever idiotic reason, and I was an idiot for many years. I want to be a millionaire. I want to be a CEO. I want to be in the corner office. I was very clear about what I was going to get when I reached there and how I would feel if I don't, because then I would look like a failure according to myself. But I never ever asked myself the question. So what doesn't change in the life that I'm leading at that point in time? Once I became a CEO or once I became a millionaire? So extraordinarily powerful questions we rarely even think of asking. Sometimes we are afraid of asking those questions. And I'll come to the reason why. The second so what question is, so what if I don't get that? And what is it that doesn't change? What remains the same? I have my family. I have a loving wife. I have wonderful children. So what if I'm not a millionaire? So what if I'm not a CEO? So what? And these are questions we should ask ourselves again and again. And questions we should also ask our clients once we are comfortable asking ourselves. There was a time when I worked with Timothy Galloway. He did the only train the trainer program, facilitator program, and I was selected to be part of that when I was working with him and Sir John Whitmore. And this was in the Queen's Club, the Macau of tennis. And he taught us the whole concept of his inner game. And there was an exercise that he made us do. He said, just imagine that your life is a business and you're investing your time as if you were invest money in different parts of your life. Some of it could be yourself, your advancement. Some of it could be your parents. Some of it could be your children. It could be somebody else. It could be multiple things. He outlined a few. So now you put down as to what those percentages are. And now I'm giving you a chance, once in a lifetime chance, to reallocate your portfolio with the one proviso that you cannot go back on it. So what would you do? He gave us about half an hour. There were many people who just broke down. They were crying when they came back into that room. And what they shared was so amazingly powerful. I know for many of us, the realization that came up so strongly was, fortunately, in a sense, I was past the time. I had already discovered that whatever nonsense that I had before in my 40s was useless. And fortunately, the time that I met Tim was in my probably early 60s, I guess. There were many people much younger. And that whole thing about what the heck am I chasing money and power for? Or even if I'm, for example, there was a guy who came and said, I spend a lot of my time today looking after my aged parents, and I'm not spending enough time with my children and my wife. And I know it's going to be heartrending for me and really difficult, but I have to find a way how I'm going to reallocate. I don't know how, but I need to find out how. So for each person, the solution is going to be different. But the transformation that happens when you start asking those kind of questions, what needs to change? What if it doesn't change? These 4 questions, the 2 what if questions. What if I get what I want? What if I do not get what I want? So what if I get what I want? What doesn't change? So what if I don't get what I wanted? And what remains the same? Those are the kind of questions if you can ask. The most powerful thing that happens to you is to differentiate between what I would call need and want. Needs can always be fulfilled. Needs are genuine, authentic. Whether you're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs or any other need, it's something very essential for your life. Love is a need, relationship is a need, service is a need. Money up to a point is a need, beyond a point it's not a need. Power is never a need. These are all wants, which we are conditioned and we borrow from other people. Like someone said, if my neighbor puts in an air-conditioned system in his house, I start feeling hot. It's no different from before, but just the fact that somebody else has something more than me. Ramana Maharishi made this phenomenal statement. It's actually from an Upanishad. This universe can fulfill the needs of all its billions, but it cannot fulfill the want of even one single person, the greed of one single person. So are we really operating from need or greed? So is there some way, first of all, if we go through this process and we understand what is it that we are going through, is there a way that we would be able to talk about it to our clients? Philip, I don't know what's a four-burner theory, but if it's something to do with this, fine, great. So this enables you to, can needs only be fulfilled or can I also be overcome? If it is something to be overcome, it won't be a need. Then you haven't understood the meaning of a need and a want. If it is to be overcome, it has to be a want. The need is something genuinely that comes in from within you. It's a purpose. And since you understand this, it's what you would call as a prarabdha. It is something that is built into your DNA, that you have come into this world to be able to fulfill. And there are meditation techniques that would help you to do that. Magda attended one with me. There's a third eye meditation which would help you discover what that specific purpose is. There are multiple ways of doing it. I'm not going to get into that now. So the question that is important at this point in time, if you are looking at it like going back into a very transactional way of looking at it, the 2.3, the importance, if you ask these questions, you really are able to establish your value systems. You're able to establish, is it a need or is it a want? And if it's a need, you know that it's crucial for you. And in what way is it crucial for you? You will understand what is the value that's going to fulfill. And if it's a want, even if it is something that you really do want to achieve, knowing that it's a want, fine. At least then you will be able to realize to yourself, fine, if I achieve it, that's good. If I don't, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I'll move on. It'll still be an intent that I want to fulfill. That could happen as well. Then you could ask yourself the question, what's it that's stopping me? What is there in the way? I think Revan talked about the grow model. This is my current reality. This is where I want to be, point A to point B. And the pathway is full of blocks. And how do I find the various options? How can I get over them? And what do I need to do? What do I need to shift? And all this really takes you into the realm of creating awareness and creating action. And when you start doing it yourself, and when you start doing it with this kind of a framework, and then later you're able to put it down. Today, I mean, you can just take your phone and record it as you think through it. You can write it down later in a journal. And I keep talking about it. Maybe I have mentioned this in this forum, maybe I haven't. I had the great fortune to go to a school, a Swedish school. It's called Napskolen, something of that sort. Maybe I'm pronouncing it all wrong. And the principal was Swede. He took me through the school. And children at the age of 6 in their class 1, they had a coaching register. And they are trained in it from the age of 3 when they start the school as kindergarten or pre-kindergarten. In order for them to be able to sort of express what is it that they want to reach from where they are, and what is it that they need to do to be able to get there, and how they are progressing towards that. So they actually have a beautiful journal that they create, very, very simple columns. This is what I wanted to do. This is what I'm doing. This is how I need to do more, etc., etc. And then once a week, they have a session with their teacher. Kunskapolen, whatever, how do you pronounce it? It's totally amazing. So it's that kind of a process. If children can do it at the age of 6, and I can only imagine what wonderful people they would become when they grow up. And even though we may not have had that good fortune, we can all start doing it and be able to journal and do what we are here to do. So let me just go through a couple of questions here. Working hard for more money will enable me to buy things for my family. Sure, that's your decision. And I don't have the time to sort of point holes in that argument. Yeah, in the process that you're working hard for money, which many of us have done, this is what I did. I lost the time to spend with my family, and today I regret that far more than much of the money that I made anyway disappeared. The trouble with that argument, Gadir, is that the money is very, very temporary, and the status is very temporary. That what you build up as love and what you build up as relations, it stays with you. And this is the very false logic with which I lived up to almost the age of 50. And I went through complete trauma after that. And so what I am sharing here in the hope that some of you may be able to avoid that trauma. That's about all. If you choose to live the way you want, it's your up to you. It's your choice. Having a lovely family and need, I know that you need the money, but is there a cutoff point? Is there that which provide whatever can be? It doesn't mean somebody has to be sent to an international school. It doesn't mean that I have to drive all the time a Mercedes-Benz or an SUV, expensive SUV. There are multiple things that we can take a call on. Having a loving family is a need. If you love the whole world as a family, yeah, sure. Once you start doing that, it expands to the whole community. Yes, Chris. Yeah, your family needs you to spend time with them, absolutely. And unfortunately, what it does take is a few traumas to make you realize that. The Vidyaniketan school in Bangalore would have a graph book for each child to identify. Brilliant. I didn't know that, but take a look at, if you have the opportunity, you could go to this school. Is in Sajapur Road, Shabri. And I can introduce you if you wish to the principal. Totally amazing. It's very, very different. I don't know about Vidyaniketan. I'm sure it's fantastic too. The phone of say the downside of work-life balance, James Clear. Okay, great. So yeah, much of what James Clear said, probably many of our Upanishads said much before, but the trouble is we don't know what our Upanishad said, but we all very often know what others have said. So trying to put it together, it'll be extraordinarily good. So if there are any questions, I'll answer that. There's very little time left. I didn't realize that it ran so fast. Many other reflections come out during this space, which is as a coach itself. Am I using filler words, for example? Am I really listening? Or I'm focusing on my own thoughts? Many of those things in the markers, which are about not, I would call sense of omission rather than sense of commission, which is about interrupting people and so on and so forth. In terms of my communication, am I doing well? So many of those things will come up as well if you should really seriously, authentically look at yourself and reflect on what it's doing. So what it does require is consistency. As a habit today, every day I walk in the morning, I quickly run through in my mind And your mind is far more powerful than you think it is. And you'll remember pretty much everything that you want to remember. What happened yesterday? What is it that is bothering me? Of course, as I go along in my life, less and less things bother me, but still, whatever that bothers you will come up in sharper focus. And that itself can be the intent that you can set yourself. How do I get over that, what bothers me? There are multiple ways of doing it. The simplest way to do that is just open up a journal, buy a Moleskine journal, whatever it is, or just a simple, cheap notebook. There are books which have been written on it, which can be summed up in one paragraph. There's a whole book which is written on what is called bullet journaling, I think, Bujo, or whatever it is called. It's a craze. Another one called Getting Things Done. I don't know why a whole book was written for that purpose. It is something that you can put in one page. You can create a mind map for it. There are multiple things that we can do. You can journal your own self-speak. You can start journaling your interaction with other people. It could be descriptive, it could be reflective, it could be development, and so on and so forth. Sure, if there are any questions, we can continue this in another conversation as well. Yeah, third eye meditation. What was the meditation practice? Yeah, it is called the Ajna, the third eye meditation. Wants versus, I wouldn't recommend it without guidance. These are all extremely powerful meditations which need to have someone to guide you. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, it's called a Trataka meditation. Wants versus need, beautiful discussion. The space of self-reflection where there's need can help us connect better. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the balance is, if you dig deep within yourself, you know what's a want and what's a need. Very, very simply put, the want is something that we always want to do when we borrow. We want to be better than somebody else. We are comparing ourselves constantly. We are looking for external validation, and that would be a want. But if you have fulfilled yourself and you give somebody something, then that would usually be a need. Those are some of the simple things. Oh, there's a huge, big thing Meenakshi has put in there. 5-minute one, whatever it is. Okay. Okay, so I'll close with this, and thank you very much. On laser coaching. Anyway, we'll take it up another time. Laser coaching can be done. I'm not saying it's a myth, but you need to have someone who's already reasonably aware. The issue is simple, so there's not much discussion, and you're able to finish it in 10 or 15 minutes. I wouldn't really do too much of laser coaching unless I know the person extremely well. How do I develop self-discipline? Okay, anyway, we'll continue this conversation in the self-discipline. We'll talk about it, why we don't have self-discipline, how we can get more self-discipline. I can recommend you some books to read. Thanks a lot. Magda, over to you to close the session. Thanks a lot, please.
Thanks, Ram. So everyone, you guys ask really good questions, and we always pay attention to them. But what would be really, really helpful is if you just emailed me with specific topics that you think we should cover in the webinars, because we have these series that we run, and we could cover the topics within existing webinars. But Ram and I were talking about what can we record as kind of shorter videos, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, and put those on our website for you to watch at your own leisure. They don't need to be part of the webinar. So please email me with particular questions or concepts, literally anything that you have thought about in the context of leadership or coaching, and let me know, and we'll put them on a schedule, and Ram and I can start working through them to get them as public resources. Like, we're here to share the knowledge. We don't want it just to, start and end at the webinar. So please, 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 magda@coacharya.com, MAGDA is my name, Coach Arya, because you're here. So please email me. That's one thing. Second thing, anyone who wants a CCEU for this session, I put the link in the chat. I'll do it again now. And a few of you have asked, for the process, please don't email me to ask that. Just listen now. Click on the link I've just put in. And if it's your first time claiming a CCEU, you will be prompted to register. So please register. And once you register or log in, if it's not your first rodeo, you either can click on the section that's called Claim Your CCEU or Get Your CCEU, or you can go directly to the link I just put in there, and you have to enroll in the course. This is done through our learning management system. So unfortunately, the word that's used is enroll. So just click on enroll. And once you do that, you will see a prompt to enter the password that was provided. Every webinar will have a different password. Today's password is pink for my crazy hair. So select pink, click confirm, and then you get a thing on the screen that says, congratulations, you've completed this course 100%. Click get your certificate to get your certificate. That's when you can get your certificate. And when you see your certificate, there are some cool things you can do. First of all, you can save it as a PDF for future use for your ICF credential renewal. But what I would encourage you to do is actually click on the little share to LinkedIn button, because what's pretty cool about our certificates is that they can be easily shared to LinkedIn. So it helps us because it spreads the word about the webinars that we do, but also it helps you because it kind of shows what kind of things you're interested in and what kind of topics you are attending. So please do that. So Magda, out.
Just before you
yes.
close, I just wanted to answer two questions. One was about Ruchika's question. Can I self-coach while I'm coaching? Please don't, Ruchika. The whole purpose of coaching is that you are completely immersed and focused on the client. Don't even get into inner dialogue, which is what is required for self-coaching. And Mervyn, your question, yes, you can use coaching very powerfully in these kind of situations. In fact, Magda is putting together a team of people to work with adolescents in this space. If you're interested, you can always, we have people from Britain, US, as well as India coming together on this. We would love to have more people. How do we work with children, adolescents, maybe traumatized, maybe not traumatized? There are many methodologies where you can work with people in terms of trauma. But at the simplest level, yes, coaching does help. We can help those people. And once again, thank you very much, and good night from India, and different times of the day in different places. Bye. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.